A Brass Empire is a deck builder of corporate espionage and sabotage. So the original game is set up very much in the middle, and every player would choose a corporate faction represented by the reserve deck, which are cards that only you can purchase. What new Canton adds is another layer of depth and a story about greed, corruption, love, and tragedy that expands on the lore of the game. So you have a campaign deck, which will take you through each game that you're playing against another player. And then you also have a legacy deck, as we call it, which tells the story of your particular hero and faction. So otherwise, the game is set up similarly. You have the same 10 lame employees that you start with. And you have your mining platform that you set up in New Canton, which is a city sort of located in the center of the continent and on the edge of the frontier. So it's much more rural than where most of the people in the game are familiar with, where things are much more technologically advanced. And what you'll do here is you see that the first time you play a game of New Canton, you'll look at the campaign deck and it says stop, but draw this card and read the other side before you play your first game. So usually the first card of the campaign deck gives you a setup instruction and an objective for the game that you'll typically want to set up in front of the top rows. So you'll add 20 brass into the brass pool for each player. It will tell you a story, which I won't read now and ruin for anyone. And then the next card in the campaign says, draw this card when the first mining platform is destroyed during this game. Keep drawing until you reach another stop card. So we know that when one of us destroys another person's mining platform, which typically happens in the course of a standard game of Brass Empire, we will draw more cards from here, and more events and more stories will happen. So one of the final things you'll do to play a new game of New Canton is you'll take your legacy deck and your hero card. The first card is going to tell you a story about your hero and sort of set up the situation for him or her. And then you'll take your hero card, and your hero card gives you a one-time ability that you can use during the course of the game. One of the interesting things is that you'll see that this hero card is currently at level 1. And as we play through the game, and we play games against each other and we play through the campaign, this hero will actually increase his level. His innate ability will improve, and he'll also gain additional abilities here that he can use in between games. So from here, we would play sort of a standard game of Brass Empire. So we would take our turns drawing our 5 cards, playing our cards to gain resources. So I have 4 labor and 1 construction, and then making our purchases and building our deck. So, you know, I may buy with my 1 construction, I'll probably buy one of my reserve buildings over here. And then with my 4 labor, I would probably go with the railway contractor, because not only is he the most expensive card out there, but he also happens to match my faction as a Frontier Rail employee. So as like any deck builder, all these cards go into my discard pile. I draw 5 cards to end my turn, and we would go back and forth like that for a while. Now, the first game of the campaign has a very interesting scenario. As the game goes on, eventually we'll start acquiring buildings and units that are going to start building out our infrastructure of our company, and these buildings are going to give us chances to interact with other players and sabotage them. So on a subsequent turn, I may use my Graf Airman to attack and destroy this person's mining platform. He can always rebuild it for 1 construction, but every time I blow a card up like that, I get a victory point. And then because a mining platform was destroyed, we've now triggered this campaign event, which tells us a story and tells us to trigger the Brass Explosion event card, which of course is the next card. So event cards are one of the new types of cards we have in New Canton. They can come out from any center row, and as soon as they come out, they trigger and we do what they say. So the Brass Explosion event destroys all mining platforms and units. So my Graf Airman would go in a discard pile as well. He's toast. We don't score any points for destroying these cards, but basically the table will be wiped clear and something horrible has happened. One of these mining platforms is exploded and created a chain of events that will affect the campaign moving forward. So like any game of Brass Empire, based on the objective card of the campaign, For most games, when the mining pool is over, that triggers the end game and we'll start scoring. So we would score our games like normal, counting up the value of our company by counting the brass in the bottom left-hand corner of all the cards we purchased, and then counting up our tokens that we acquired, our brass coins that we acquired throughout the course of the game. One of the things that you do with New Canton that is new is that at the end of the game, there's typically cards to draw. So this card tells a story a little bit about, and it also reminds you that each hero at the end of the game can take actions. So you'll see on the hero card that there's an AP value and that they'll eventually gain more abilities, but one of the things you can do is that I can spend action points to modify my starting deck. So when I go back to my starting deck of all my boring starting employees, one of the things you'll do in your first game is I'll spend my action point to actually dismiss one of these lame cards that I start with permanently. So when I go into my second game of New Canton, I will actually have one less union worker. He'll be permanently removed from the game, put back in the box. I only have a 9-card starting deck now, but I've purged it and I'm now focusing on the labor resource. And that's something you can do in between each game. So as you play on, your starting decks, which are typically the same between players every game, will start to diverge and focus on different strategies.